I live in South Jackson, 3 turns off Raymond Road, in a brick ranch that leans a little and whistles when the north wind gets pushy. I'm 40, divorced, and I run water for a living. Official title, Class B operator at the O.B. Curtis plant. What I tell people at cookouts is simpler. I'm the guy who makes sure the clear stuff in your glass won't pick a fight with your stomach. My daughter, Nia, is 11 and lives with her mother in Clinton. On Fridays we eat wings and she pretends to gag when I talk shop. Dad, no more pipe stories at the table. But she still asks the same question, is our water okay? Most days, it is a series of small, boring miracles. Coagulant meets river water in a rapid mix. Turbidity falls like snow in the flocculators. Clarifiers spin, filters hum. The chlorine residual holds the line. Pumps push a city's heartbeat through mains older than my grandmother. We keep a 0.2 milligrams per liter free chlorine residual at the far reaches. Watch the pH like it's gossip, dose orthophosphate so old pipes don't eat themselves. If you do it right, nobody notices your existence. The Sunday the river rose and our phones started howling. The Pearl was out of its polite clothes. Rain north of us had pushed the brown into a kind of rage. Raw water turbidity spiked so fast the graph looked like a lie. Alarms stacked like bad decisions, high turbidity, low disinfectant, filter to waste screaming. We opened more alum, then more. The jar tests looked like mud pies. The river laughed. I called my supervisor, who sounded like he'd bitten down on foil, and he called the city, and somewhere someone wrote boil water notice into a template. People think a boil notice is like a snow day. It is not. It is a declaration that the world under your feet, the invisible world of pressure and protection, has gone paper thin. Under 20 psi and the system can backflow. Your neighbor's garden hose becomes a straw into the mains. Pressure slid and slid. One of the big high-lift pumps coughed itself into retirement. We brought in a diesel pump on a flatbed and bolted hope to a suction line. Fingers crossed that the gasket didn't remember it was old. In the control room, the SCADA screens told stories no one wanted to read. Chlorine residuals dipping at the ends of the city. Tanks low enough to make my teeth hurt. The humidity felt like a second bad decision. I drank coffee that tasted like having no options and watched the numbers like a gambler. Outside, a TV truck idled. Camera pointed at the fence like it could shame steel into working. By nightfall, my phone was a siren. Nia texted from her mom's. Do we have to boil? Yes, baby. You always boil when the city says boil. Boiling is like seatbelts. You're mad to need it. You're mad if you don't use it and find out you did. I told her to run the kettle until it sounded like a dragon and to let the water cool before making ramen. She sent a dragon emoji and a heart, which felt like a treaty I hadn't earned. When the pressure fell below what the state calls acceptable, we lost whole neighborhoods. You could turn a tap and hear the hollow sound of a system confessing it was tired. At dawn, a woman in a pink robe showed up at the gate with a plastic jug and a look like she had already heard all the apologies. My mama is on dialysis at home, she said. Tell me what to do that isn't pray. I wanted to say everything. I said, we're staging water at WLBT, at North Park at Forest Hill, and gave her the 2 gallons I keep in my truck for bad luck. She nodded like I'd marked a square on a map that was mostly blank. We kept the plant alive with spit and borrowed equipment. A state guy in pressed khakis walked the gallery and wrote in a notebook while we bled filters and swore at valves whose stems hadn't turned in 20 years. At lunch, which happened sometime between yesterday and tomorrow, the mayor did a presser with words like resilience and systemic neglect, and the comments under the live stream turned mean. I stopped reading when someone suggested we drink what we make to prove it wasn't poison. News we already do. We live here. The first week felt like being inside a mouth left open. Hot, wet breath everywhere, generators complaining, trucks reversing with that beep that makes your skull thin. The National Guard showed up with pallets of bottles and a plan that looked like geometry you could drive. Lines ran for hours outside handout sites, windows down, kids wilted in car seats. I left my shift and joined them in my city polo because a gallon is a gallon no matter who wears the vest. The sun bounced off shrink wrap and made the lot a griddle. In the third car was Ms. Thomas, who used to scold me for riding my bike too fast past her azaleas. You look tired, baby, she said, and I laughed because small talk felt like oxygen. I loaded 2 cases into her trunk, and she touched my wrist, the universal sign for I see you in a place that forgets to look. In the 11th car, a man yelled that the water was brown because we were lazy. He said other things you can guess. I wanted to tell him about stuck valves and clarifier blankets and the way alum coagulates better at certain pH and how the river does not respect our schedules. I handed him water and said, "I'm sorry," because anger and thirst are cousins and both can get ugly when left alone. On day 4, heat index 106, I climbed the North Clearwell stairs and the world tilted. My hands remembered the handrail, but my knees had notes. I sat with my head between them while the clock ticked on the wall like it was counting something other than seconds. Darnell, my shift partner with forearms like bridge piers, squatted in front of me. "You good?" he asked, which is Mississippi for "Do you need me to carry you down?" "Salt," he said, and gave me chips. I cried for a minute in a stairwell that smells like chlorine and old paint, then got up because pumps don't care about your feelings. News crews filmed the Browns spitting from taps in Belhaven, in West Jackson, in kitchens that looked like my auntie's. They filmed church folks with folding tables and gas stoves making spaghetti for 10 blocks. Here's what they didn't film. Darnell texting me, "You eat?" At 3 a.m., my supervisor sleeping on a cot under the dry polymer silo. The way the pipefitters from 3 counties brought their own wrenches and didn't ask for permission to start turning bolts. Nia asked if she could shower at my place because her mom's trickle-barely rinsed shampoo. We turned it into a game. Capture the first half-gallon for the toilet tank, the second for dishes, boil a pot for the end. She wore a swim cap and made dolphin noises while I timed with my phone because you become a meter reader at your own sink when your city is thirsty. After, we sat on the porch while the sky did that late summer Mississippi blue and the cicadas tuned up, and she asked, "Why didn't they fix it before it broke?" I told her about budgets and politics and pipes that don't make campaign ads. She said, "That's dumb." And I agreed with my whole body. At a pastor's meeting in a fellowship hall that smelled like Lysol and coffee, I stood up in my dirty polo and said, "Here's what to tell your people. Boil 1 full minute. Don't rely on your fridge filter. Save water in clean bottles. If your pressure goes to nothing, call 311 so we can map the holes." A deacon whose eyes had already forgiven me before I spoke passed a basket, and the church raised enough to buy a booster pump for a small apartment building on the south side. We installed it with duct tape creativity and a prayer that the electrical inspector believed in grace. Help arrived in bulk. Contractors with logos from other states parked cranes where my daughter usually plays tag. EPA folks walked the plant floor with eyebrows that took notes before their pens did. A federal incident commander set up in the conference room with maps, real ones, layered with pressure zones and tank levels, and for the first time in a long time I felt like the adults had joined the table. We rented mobile clarifiers, brought in a membrane unit that looked like a fancy dishwasher, and added raw water pumps loud enough to scare the geese. We rebuilt a lime feed that had been a rumor for 2 mayors. When a vendor quoted a part in weeks, a colonel said, "Try days." And suddenly the calendar remembered it could surprise us. We started training new operators in a conference room that still had last decade's motivational posters on the wall. I printed cheat sheets. Jar Test 101, don't chase the residual, lead it, why orthophosphate saves fights later. A 22-year-old named Trey asked why alum works. No one had asked me why at work in years. I drew little cartoons of positive charges hugging dirt. He laughed and then passed the state test on his first swing. I stapled his certificate to the corkboard like a diploma. Around week 3, I walked into the Walgreens on Terry Road to buy yet another case of bottled water for my block because the guard site was tapped out. The cashier recognized my plant badge and offered her employee discount. I started to say no, dumb pride, and she said, "Hush and say thank you." So I did. Later that day, a woman posted a photo of me on Facebook loading water into a stranger's trunk with the caption, "This is our water guy." I read it alone in my truck and let the seatbelt hold me while I felt both exposed and seen. Not everything held. A 16-inch main near a plant gate decided its century was up. We watched a geyser carve mud like a child. The boil stayed, because once you tell a city to boil you don't stop until 3 days of clean samples clear your conscience. A reporter asked me on camera if I would let my child drink from the tap. I said, Not today, but soon, and wanted to hide from the whole city. That night Nia said she was proud of me. Children are unfair and generous like that. The counselor of the city brought in wore sneakers and didn't try to sage the chlorine out of the air with words. He talked about moral injury, how it happens when you know what right looks like but can't reach it because the ladder is missing rungs. He said, "You did not build the ladder. And you are a person, not a plant." I did not roll my eyes, because someone giving you a sentence that doesn't require your defense is a luxury in a room full of alarms. And then, in the smallest way, the numbers began behaving. Pressure crept up. The chlorine residuals at the long dead ends stopped their sulk. The jar test started looking like water instead of soup. We sent the first round of lab bottles to the state and I imagined them like carrier pigeons. Negative. 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 The Boyle notice dropped on a Tuesday with a press release that used words like cautiously optimistic. People celebrated by doing dishes. I cried into mine. A year later, the plant still whistles, but it doesn't wheeze. We have redundancy where we used to have hope. We changed out 2 high lifts and rebuilt the backwash system so the filters don't sulk after midnight. The city installed automatic flushing stations at the far ends so we don't have to drive to the dead ends and open hydrants like cowboys. We pay new operators a wage that keeps them. Trey trains the next trays. I keep a jar test kit in my truck because being ready is my current religion. On Saturdays, I lead a little tour for 8th graders from Brinkley Middle called How Water Happens. I show them a beaker of Pearl River raw and whisper, "It's okay to say EW." And they do. I let them watch the flock form. I tell them pressure is like blood. You don't think about it until you have to. We stand at the fence and look out at the brown, and I point to the intake and say, "We turn that into this," and hand them cups of lab-grade clear. We toast like people at a fancy table, and I tell them to come work for me in 10 years. At home, Nia drinks from the tap now but still asks, "Are we good?" I put my hand under the stream and pretend I can feel residual with my skin. "We're good," I say and mean today. The lawn is brown gravel now and my neighbors joke that I started a trend. But a fire truck can make a turn in front of my house, and that's worth more than green. I keep 2 jugs in the pantry labeled emergency and a sharpened note on the fridge that says, "Boyle is not a moral failing. It's for me." Sometimes at night I drive past the plant just to hear the pumps purr. There's a sound they make when the bearings are happy and the head is right. It's like a cat forgiving you. I pull into the lot, kill the engine, and sit with the window down while the city breathes through the pipe gallery. On the fence, someone taped up a sign after the crisis that the sun bleached nearly to white. You can still read the last 2 words. Thank you. I do not feel like a hero. I feel like a person who chose not to leave. There were days when leaving would have been the same thing. The job offers from counties with pipes that don't throw tantrums. The recruiter who said, "Raise your family somewhere stable." But my family lives here already. Stability isn't only pressure and parts. It's Ms. Thomas's azaleas and pastors who pick up a wrench and children who can say orthophosphate without laughing. Here's my list, the one taped inside the lab door and the one I whisper when the river looks like it's rehearsing. Jar test before you guess. Don't chase the residual, lead it. Keep a spare gasket. Keep 3. Pressure is a promise you make to a city. Keep it above 20. Boyle notices save pride, not just stomachs. Write down what you did so the next person doesn't have to invent you. Drink the water when it's time. Tell people when it isn't. I'm a man in Jackson who turns brown into clear for a living. When the tap runs right and the glass doesn't argue and my daughter fills a cup without asking, I count to 60 in my head the way I do when we dose chlorine, and I say thank you out loud because gratitude is a habit like flushing, and both keep the line moving.